So how many of you use Instagram or some other type of social media? I don't know about you, but sometimes I can get lost scrolling through my feed. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but most things you see on social media aren't real life. Really. It's more of a highlight reel, a set of pictures and videos that represent only the best and brightest moments of a person's life.
But even though social media only shows the best of the best, it still has a way of making us wish we had what other people have. Sometimes just to scroll through social media feels like a constant reminder of what we are missing.
Maybe for you, it's a material possession, like a new pair of shoes or the latest iPhone. You see someone else has it and it makes you crazy because you want it too. Or maybe it's a relationship, one with a boyfriend or girlfriend, or even just a relationship with a parent or a sibling that you wish you had. Maybe for you it's money. You see other people buying expensive clothes or going on nice trips, and you wish you and your family had the funds to do the same.
No matter what it is you feel like you're missing, my point is this. It's hard not to notice all the things we don't have. But the problem doesn't stop there. You see, once we've noticed the things we don't have, we sometimes start to obsess over them. We think about them over and over again until something sort of shifts inside our minds. We stop just thinking we want the things we don't have, and we start thinking we deserve them instead.
There's a word some people use to describe what it means to live like we deserve things, or that something is owed to us. The word is entitlement. Entitlement is that shift that happens between want and deserve. It teaches your brain to think things like, it's not fair. I should get to go on that awesome vacation like that too. Or, he doesn't work nearly as hard as I do. I should have gotten that spot on the team. Or even, I do stuff around the house. I deserve a bigger allowance from my parents.
See, there's a big difference between simply wanting things we don't have and actually believing those things are owed to us. And when we make that shift in our minds, whether we realize it or not, we're becoming entitled.
That's a pretty big problem. Why? Well, because when we start believing we're entitled to the things we don't have, it makes it more difficult to see the things we do have. It keeps us so focused on what we think we're owed that we almost forget all the things we've already received. It's a miserable way to live, if you ask me.
So what do we do about it? If we don't want to live this way, focused on what we don't have and feeling entitled, what do we do to change the way we think? Like we said last week, the Bible has a lot to say about things like money and wealth, and you can bet that the Bible has a lot to say about entitlement too. There were so many people back then who were focused on what they didn't have and lived as though they deserved more than they got.
And the verse we're going to look at today is one that talks to people about just that. It's a letter written to Jewish people who had converted to Christianity in a book of the Bible called Hebrews. These Christians were taught to believe that they were special from birth because of the fact that they were God's chosen people. God chose to use the Jewish people to bless the whole world through one very extraordinary Jewish baby we know as Jesus. We talk about special.
So Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, when he died and came back to life, changed everything for people back then. It threw out all the old rules and made room for a whole new way of living. But as you can probably imagine, a lot of the Jewish people had a hard time letting go of some of the beliefs they'd always been taught. In other words, they weren't adjusting well to this new way of life. So the writer of Hebrews sat down to write a letter designed to encourage them toward a new way of life, the one that Jesus modeled for them. And at the very end of the letter, we find this warning about money, wealth, and entitlement.
It starts like this. Don't be obsessed with getting more material things. Be relaxed with what you have. So basically, the writer of this passage was saying, stop worrying about things you don't have. Stop focusing on what you think you deserve. Instead, rest easy and be happy with what you do have. Why do you think the author of Hebrews brought this up? Why did he include this in his letter?
Well, I think it's because the author knew what we know, that entitlement is an ugly little feeling that is a way of sneaking up on us. Jesus came to bring us a new, better way of living. And the writer of Hebrews didn't want the Jewish people to miss out on that freedom by focusing on what they wished they had or thought they deserved. And I don't want you to miss it either.
Entitlement causes us to miss what we do have by keeping our eyes focused on what we don't have. It was true back then for the Hebrew people, and it's true for us today too. So at this point, you might be thinking, that's great and all, but what do we do about it? How do we stop the feeling of entitlement from creeping in?
Well, that's where the next part of the verse comes in. The writer didn't just tell us that we shouldn't live with entitlement. He told us how to do it. Let's read on. Since God assured us, I'll never let you down, never walk off and leave you. So how do we fight the feeling of entitlement? By remembering that God has promised that He'll never let us down. He'll never leave us without the things we need. In fact, He'll never leave us at all. So rather than looking at life through a lens that tells us that we're missing out on things we are owed, we can instead choose to trust that we'll always have the things we need because God will never let us down.
So here's a truth I want you to remember when you find yourself slipping toward entitlement. You have something to be grateful for. You have the promise that God is never going to leave you and never going to let you down. And that's a pretty big deal if you ask me. It's definitely something to be grateful for. So what do we do with all this? How do we keep our eyes off the things we want and instead focus on what we're grateful for?
For some of you, this simply begins by recognizing entitlement in your life. It means catching the thoughts that cross your mind, telling you that you deserve something someone else has. It means recognizing that sometimes you feel like you're owed things in this life. When you catch yourself feeling envious of something someone else has or wishing for something to happen in your life, stop and ask yourself this question. Do I just want this or do I think I deserve it? That question will help you recognize entitlement as it's happening in your thoughts. After all, you can't change a way of thinking if you don't know it's there.
And once you recognize it, I think you have to make a choice to be grateful. In other words, you have to choose contentment. Contentment is the opposite of entitlement. Remember last week we talked about recognizing that we all have something that matters. Well, contentment takes this idea one step further by encouraging us to be grateful for it. Contentment asks us to be happy with the here and now. Be grateful for the things we have just as they are, and contentment will help us avoid entitlement.
Sometimes we can find contentment in the least expected places. Sometimes it takes helping others to realize how grateful we are for the things we once took for granted. So try this. At the end of each day this week, make a list of 5 things that you're grateful for. And this could literally be anything. Your family, your team, your phone, your small group, or it could be things like clean water, drive-through restaurants, or chocolate donuts.
Whatever they are, write them down each evening before bed to help you reflect on what God gave you that day to be grateful for. Then, pay attention to the way practicing gratitude changes your focus and attitude. I think you'll be surprised at how easy it is to fight off entitlement when we choose gratitude instead. After all, you have something to be grateful for. As you leave today, I want you to think about this question. What's one thing I have to be grateful for today?